The time has come to try and finally lock in my wildcard ahead of game week 30. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and today we're going to be taking a look at my wildcard draft for game week 30, and what is quite a locked-in one now. I've actually made most, if not all, of these transfers by the time you'll be seeing this, so it is going to be very close to what I lock in on Saturday morning. Before we do that though, a quick thank you to anyone who is watching one of my videos for the very first time today. The last 48 hours have been pretty crazy for me. Thanks massively to a shout out from Ross, otherwise known as Raptor, in the FPL community on Twitter the other day, and it started a tidal wave of new subscribers for me, and a number of other big accounts on Twitter then also shouted me out as well. So if you are one of those, thank you so much, and in particular thank you to Ross for starting that big shout out wave that got me past 1,000 subscribers for this season, which of course, as you all know, was my target from the start of the season. So it's a massive thank you from me. If you're new around here, I hope you enjoy my content, and thank you so much for joining the fun. In the meantime though, we've got a wildcard to prepare. So let's take a look first off at what the defence and the goalkeepers are looking like on my wildcard. So here we go, the defence and the goalkeepers all at once. Goalkeepers to start off with. I've been on these two since the very start, and to be honest, there's very little chance of me moving off of them now. Petrovic was a player that I was maybe ever so slightly nervous about. I thought that maybe Robert Sanchez could come back in and steal some minutes off of him in a Chelsea shirt before the end of the season. But it looks like Sanchez has actually had an injury setback anyway in the last couple of days, so Petrovic is probably more locked in than ever. That being said, I think I also want a second keeper that doubles, that also has a good few fixtures here and there, that will complement Petrovic on the weeks that he doesn't have a great fixture. And that player is Onana. I'm very happy with him. I've had a look through the schedule between now and the end of the season, and they actually match up pretty well together. The 1 week that they don't match up well is when they play each other, and I just need to back whichever keeper I think has a higher chance of keeping a clean sheet in the Man United-Chelsea game. At this point, I'm very happy with these two keepers. I think the fact that they both have a double game week in game week 37, and Petrovic obviously has the bonus of a double game week in either 35 or 36, makes him pretty much locked in. Onana, there maybe is an argument to look elsewhere, possibly even at Jordan Pickford without the double in 37. They do have Sheffield United at home that week though, so it's not bad, and they have some good fixtures as well. For now though, I'm happy enough with Onana. I could just about stretch the budget to him, and the fact that he's got the double game week is the swinger for me between him and Pickford. Now moving into defence, and unfortunately with this wildcard draft, I've got 0.0 in the bank, which is why I've had to make a lot of these moves fairly early. And it's meant that I can't quite afford Porro over a doggy. That is one sacrifice in this team that unfortunately I just had to make it all work elsewhere. Now, Udogie himself has good underlying attacking data, 0.2 XGI per 90, compared to Porro's 0.29. So it is worse, but for the money, I think it's a sacrifice and a compromise I'm willing to make. They're both pretty nailed for minutes. They both get forward into good attacking positions. And I'd say Udogie's goal threat is actually fairly reasonable. Another reason that I really want that Spurs defender locked in now is because, again, they have two double game weeks after 34. So either 35 or 36. And then 37 is pretty much locked in now as well. So with that in mind, I do want to contain at least one or two Spurs assets now. Same goes for Chelsea, by the way, but we'll come on to that in just a minute. And then it means I've got less transfers to make come game week 35 or 36 when they double. Now, at this point, it's probably worth noting that I am on a free hit 34, followed by a bench boost 37 team structure and strategy for the rest of the season. So that is why maybe some of these moves are fairly locked in for now, and also I'm ignoring other players that maybe have a really good double in game week 34. That won't matter to me because obviously I'm on a free hit that week. Now moving across to Gusto, another player that maybe I was a little bit worried about. So both of the Chelsea boys in the defence and in goal, I was maybe slightly concerned with for minutes overall. But I think because James, again, is still on the injury list for Chelsea, they put out a little list before each press conference, and James is still continuing his rehabilitation program according to that list. And Poch has said that maybe he can get some minutes before the Euros. Now, he said that on the 18th of March, so that wasn't that long ago. I don't think we've had a massive update since then. So I think Gusto, for the time being, is pretty locked in. He's also very good going forward. He looks like a fantastic asset FPL-wise, especially for the price point as well. So I think the value for money makes him a very good buy. Now, the other thing with Gusto is, obviously, later on in the season, he could become a risk, but the fixtures between now and 36, 37 anyway are actually still really good. So if the worst case scenario happens and he starts getting rotated out for James when he comes back from his injury around game week 36, 37, then it's just one extra transfer. And to be honest, I think Gusto probably pays off that -4 that I might potentially need to sell him between now and then to make this a worthwhile move. And again, because he's so cheap, it enables so much else in my side. Now, moving across again, Connor Bradley is a player that snuck into my wildcard draft, and I'm actually really happy with him at the moment. I think he's a player that, out of all of these 15, he's the one that I'm looking to get rid of first. He's definitely a short, maybe 2 game week punt, but I think in the meantime, those 2 game weeks are just so good that it's worth taking that risk. We've had an update on Trent overnight. It looks like he's going to be 2 or 3 weeks away, and he's targeting either the Atalanta game or the Crystal Palace game as his return date, which gives me a 2 to 3 week window on Connor Bradley before he becomes an issue in my side. And because Andy Robertson is also now on the injury list, although it does look like it's fairly marginal how long that's going to be, it might not be a long one, it means that potentially their resources at fullback are going to be quite stretched for the next week or two. With that in mind, that means that potentially we could be looking at Connor Bradley fairly locked in at right back, and Gomez could move across to left back, for instance. Now, that being said, he is still a minutes risk, so I'm not completely convinced on it, but I think the upside is there. He's started the matches recently when Trent has been out anyway, and as we've seen, he is actually a very talented young footballer. So I think Klopp will probably favour him for the time being. He's looked very, very strong, and with the fixtures, Brighton at home, Sheffield United at home, there are attacking returns on the table there and at least 1 clean sheet on the table too. So I think for a 2 game week punt before I move him across to another double game weeker, I'm pretty happy with that. Now on the bench, I've gone for 2 very, very popular picks on the wildcard. Lascelles at home to West Ham. And again, Newcastle's fixtures between now and the end of the season are absolutely incredible. Not only that though, Lascelles is also only 3.9 million. So again, I've taken as much money as possible out of the defence to afford what is quite a mega looking front 7 or front 8 at the moment. Now, with Lascelles, I won't expect to start him every week, but they do have great fixtures, especially from 35 onwards, and he's ideal on a bench boost. It's very rare that we would get a heads up this far in advance that someone is going to be pretty locked in for a game week 37 bench boost, 7 or 6 game weeks in advance. But with Botman out for the remainder of the season, and Lascelles, the player who did step in previously and got 90 minutes, I think, in pretty much every game during that stretch earlier this season, I'd be very surprised if he lost his place now. Now, moving across again, Gabriel is a player that maybe is a little bit of a fear pick. I put out on Twitter the other day that I'm basically asking how many clean sheets Arsenal keep between now and the end of game week 34. They've actually got not tough fixtures from Arsenal's point of view. Obviously, Man City is. After that, I would probably expect them to win the majority, if not all, of their games. But I'm not sure they're great for clean sheets. They've got Luton at home. Luton have scored, I think, in their last 17 Premier League games now. Arsenal are the team that would be able to stop them, if any. But I wouldn't say that's a clean sheet banker. And then they've got Aston Villa and Brighton after that as well, followed by Chelsea and Wolves in the double. Now, I think there is a reasonable chance they keep clean sheets in those matches. And at the moment, I'm siding with them keeping enough that it makes Gabriel worthwhile. But I think there is an argument to go against him and back yourself from a short-term point of view that you can find a defender elsewhere with good upside that could take on the likes of Gabriel during that period of fixtures. Gabriel, though, the reason I'm settled on him at the moment is because he's got great goal threat from corners. Arsenal have clearly been working on that as well over the winter break, and their defensive numbers are just ridiculous. It would leave me so exposed to an Arsenal clean sheet if I transferred him out now. And whilst I'm happy to bench him this week, I do want to start him in at least 2 or 3 of the game weeks between now and game week 34. Now, after that, I think he is definitely a player that I want to be moving on because I need to get to another double game weeker. But again, there aren't too many locked-in transfers between now and 34. There are a lot of locked-in transfers after 34 to 37, though, by the way. So he is a player that maybe I need to consider selling before game week 34 comes along, and probably look at a double game weeker there, just so I'm not booking in another transfer in the stretch between 35 and 37, because I'm only going to have a couple of free transfers to get across to 15 double game weekers. In the meantime, though, those are my back 5 and my 2 keepers. I'm pretty locked in on these, so let me know in the comments below what you think of them and which players I'm missing, if any. I imagine Ait Nouri is going to be probably one of the first comments. So moving into the midfield, and the 4 on the pitch are about as locked as players could be on a wildcard for me. Now, from left to right, I think the first 3 not only are good picks for the next few weeks, but they're also fantastic captaincy options. So Salah, Palmer and Son, all great captains this week with great home fixtures. I will be analysing the best captains for this week in a section later on in the video, so I'm not going to reveal who my captain is at this moment in time. However, for now, Salah, I think even though I'm on a free hit 34 strategy, does make the world of sense. 2 great fixtures in 30 and 31, and he's also not going to be owned by everyone. So for once, maybe I'll be able to get a bit of benefit from having him. And I don't think there's much stopping him from being one of the top point scorers between now and game week 34. So for reference, it's Brighton at home, Sheffield United at home, Man United and Crystal Palace. That is a great run of 4 fixtures between now and then, and I back him to do really well during that time frame. He is obviously a player that I will be looking to potentially transfer out in game week 37 when they don't have a double game week. Although, to be honest, unless it's for money reasons and it's helping me upgrade elsewhere, he's also not a player that I'd be desperate to sell in 37 anyway. We know how explosive he is. Even with a single game week, he could still match or even beat a lot of the double game weekers. That being said, though, I'm pretty certain that I am going to want to sell him because there's a couple of upgrades that I would want to make in this side that require some money in the bank. And by 37, I think the temptation is just going to take hold of me to upgrade elsewhere and maneuver Salah out for another double game weeker, maybe the likes of Foden, maybe the likes of Anthony Gordon, because they're so much cheaper. They are in themselves great assets, ones that I am tempted to have on the game week 30 wildcard anyway, but haven't quite found room for as it stands. But again, they've got good double game weeks, good underlying data themselves, so I'll probably want to make that move. Now, moving across to Palmer, again, I think he is, if anyone in this 15 is, he's probably the most locked-in player on my wildcard. There wasn't even a brief moment in time I thought about going against him. He's got so much in his favour, 2 double game weeks, great fixtures, fantastic value for money as well, seriously underpriced. He's on penalties, he gets 90 minutes. The injury doubt has gone from the international break as well. He's in training and Poch has said he's confirmed to be in the mind for starting in game week 30 as well. So with all of that in the back of my mind, there isn't a single moment I was thinking about not having Cole Palmer. So again, he is a captaincy option this week against Burnley at home, but I'll go into that in a later section. Across to Son. Now, Son is another player that I was really keen to have on this wildcard draft. I've got value tied up in him as well. So again, I didn't want to even consider selling him because I couldn't get back to him as easily either. Good fixture this week. Obviously, Luton at home is definitely in the captaincy shout. But beyond that, also 2 double game weeks, much like Chelsea, and he is himself a very explosive asset. Now, one issue with Son that I mentioned earlier on this week is that he might get pushed back out wide to left wing. Now, that is on the proviso that Richarlison is fit, and Richarlison also slots back into centre forward. Now, there are a couple of reasons I don't think that that's a massive problem. Number one is, even on the left wing, even though the data hasn't been fantastic across the season, Son has still been finding pockets of space, and in recent weeks, they have also been able to find a lot of chances for their wingers rather than earlier on in the season when they played a little bit wider. So the wingers at Spurs are getting a lot more chances than they were earlier on. So even if he does move back out wide, I don't think it's the end of the world. He's on penalties as well, so that's a key tick in the Son Heung-min column. And also, Richarlison is an injured out for game week 30. So that not only makes him a better captaincy candidate if he goes back to centre forward, but also if he's an injured out for game week 30, he could also be an injured out for game week 31, which is just 2 days afterwards as well. So Son could have a couple of games at centre forward here. Even if not, I still think he's a good option and very, very explosive. I don't really want to back against him on a wild card. And of course, because I'm on a game week 34 free hit, I can just remove him in the week that he's got a blank. So I don't need to worry about that either. Now, moving across again, Bukayo Saka is another player, a bit like Salah, that I am booking in a transfer for potentially. Now, again, I don't need to sell him ahead of game week 37 when he only has a single game week. I think it's Man United away that week. Because realistically, he's a fantastic asset. He gets 0.8 XGI per 90. He's on penalties. He gets 90 minutes week in, week out. And against Man United away from home, I'm not exactly backing him not to score that week. So I don't think he's a must sell. And if it means taking a hit to do so around game week 37, it's a pretty marginal decision whether or not I'd want to. Between now and then, though, I think Arsenal have got good enough fixtures, especially from an attacking point of view, that I'd back Saka to do well in any given one of them. And again, I don't really want to risk going without him on a wild card. This week is the one week that I'd be maybe tempted to bench him for Garnacho, who I will come on to in just a moment's time. But outside of that, he starts every single week for me. I don't need to worry about the free hit 34, which obviously I've got him for anyway. But realistically speaking, there's not many drafts that I would be choosing from this week that wouldn't include Bukayo Saka. Now, moving on to Garnacho, and he's the one that I've been weighing up most of this week. Now, if you watch my earlier video this week, one of the drafts had Garnacho in it. It was the 3-4-3. And Garnacho enables a lot, but I don't think he's as explosive as some of the other picks that I could be picking as my fifth midfielder. So I'm going without Gordon, I'm going without Richarlison, and I'm going without Foden. Those are the three players that I'm really gutted that I haven't been able to find space for on this wildcard. And the one that I'm most gutted that I'm not able to afford at the moment is Phil Foden. I would love to have him in on the wildcard. He's got good fixtures between now and game week 37. And of course, he's got great underlying data. He's been very, very explosive himself recently. And he's a player with pretty decent ownership too, so he could hurt me between now and then. So this wildcard is not a statement saying I don't think Phil Foden's going to do well. I just can't realistically back him over any of the four midfielders I've already got on the starting 11. I can't put him in over Saka or Son or Salah, in my personal view anyway. Some of you out there might disagree with that, so do let me know in the comments below if you do so. But also, I've got an easy route to him around game week 36 or 37 if I do choose to sell Salah. Now, that's when I really, really want him by anyway, although it is worth noting between now and then, they do have some really tasty fixtures I'm going to be worried about not owning him for. Now, one of those fixtures is Luton, but that comes in between their Champions League fixtures, and there is maybe a suggestion that he could get rotated in that match. Now, I don't really subscribe to that. I think Man City play their strongest 11 every single week, if at all possible, until the title race is sewn up, if they ever sew it up, of course. Now, with that in mind, I think Foden is very, very likely to start all of the matches between now and the end of the season if he's fit enough to. Obviously, if he needs a rest, that is a different conversation. But I still back him to start most, if not all, matches and maybe just get a couple of early subs where they are able to and where the match is tied up. Now, moving on from Phil Foden, because quite frankly, I just can't afford him unless I make one or two sacrifices on a wild card that I'm just not willing to make. The other two, I think, are both really good picks, Richarlison and Gordon, but I keep coming back to two key issues with both of them. Now, Richarlison, is obviously a fantastic pick, but it's quite a simple issue, and that is fitness. We just don't know for sure that he's going to be fit to start in game week 30. And that is one of the key matches I'd want him for. Luton at home, fantastic match. And if I knew he was going to start that match at centre forward, then I'd absolutely want him on my wildcard, because that is a brilliant match. And then he's got 2 double game weeks after game week 34 as well. But if he's not guaranteed to start game week 30, then that's a risk to start with. And then after that, the fixtures aren't so incredible that I'd be willing to rip my team up, spend an extra 2 million on that slot in midfield, and make sacrifices elsewhere just to have him in. And also, Spurs do have options there now. They do have the potential to take him off early. And again, because he's a bit of an injury doubt, a bit of a minute's risk, I would be a little bit worried that there are a couple of early subs there. That being said, though, great pick. If he is fit this week, I would be very, very tempted to include him. However, as it stands, I think that's enough to put me off. Now, moving across to Gordon, who is the other player that I'd love to have but can't quite get to at the moment. The reason that I keep coming back to that I don't want to necessarily lock myself into Gordon right now is because I do have 2 Newcastle in this draft anyway, so that's a big hint on what my forward line is going to contain. But because I've already got 2, if I bring in Gordon, that locks me out of getting to Kieran Trippier later on around game week 35, 36, 37, when I think they've got a really good chance of clean sheets. He's got a good chance of attacking returns, and he could be quite a nice differential. So whilst I really like Gordon, and he's fantastic in the home matches, of course, of which 3 of their next 4 are at home, I think there's enough going against him because it locks me out, and because I'm pretty happy with my midfield 4 and the 3 I've gone up front, that he is maybe just ever so slightly out of the conversation for me. Now, that being said, if I did have another 1.1 million and I could upgrade Garnacho to Gordon, I think I would do it. But because the money is tight, and because of the Kieran Trippier thing looming over me around game week 35 onwards, it's just enough to put me off for now. But he is a great pick. Anyone who's asking why isn't Gordon here, that is why. I do really like him. So that is basically why I'm ignoring Foden, Richarlison and Gordon for the time being. So the one player I have been able to include is Garnacho. And as I mentioned, he's the player that kind of enables the rest of this draft. He is very much my 8th attacker. But the weeks that I am planning to play him in, I'm really happy to own him for. So I think he ticks a lot of boxes because of the strategy, rather than necessarily thinking that he is the 5th best midfielder I'd want. I think in the weeks that I need him, he actually does come into the conversation as one of the better picks that week. So I think Garnacho enables it all. For 4.9 million, he's explosive enough. I don't think he's as explosive as the likes of Richarlison, Foden or Gordon. But again, because of the money and because of what it does elsewhere in my team, he's a player that I am pretty happy to own for the time being. And again, because he doubles in game week 37, it's just another transfer that I don't need to lock in later on down the line. He has been absolutely nailed into that Man United starting 11 for a long, long time now, and it looks like they're pretty settled on what their favoured front 4 is looking like. He is very much a part of that, and he looks like, recently at least, he's very much coming of age too. So I'm kind of banking on his underlying data to continually improve, and Man United to hopefully find their feet between now and the end of the season. 0.27 XG per 90 as well is actually not that bad either. It's only 0.06 away from Phil Foden's, who obviously has been very explosive himself. So perhaps Garnacho's been a little bit unlucky not to get a few more goals than he has done so far this season. I think he's got 5 goals, 5 assists, but obviously he wasn't really starting for the first few weeks. I think he started 2, then he was on the bench for quite a while, and then he got into the side. So since he got into the side, he's actually been really decent value for money. And I think, again, because of what it enables in my side, he's a player that I'm very happy to either have on the bench this week or start ahead of Saka. That is very much a conversation I need to have with myself. But from then on, all of the weeks that I want him in, he's got a great fixture, so I'm pretty happy to own him, to be honest. So moving into the forward line, obviously only 3 players to discuss here. So let's start off with the big money one. So Erling Haaland is going to make it on my Game Week 30 wildcard draft as things stand. Now, earlier on in the week, I was really, really tempted to have a 1-week farewell tour on Ollie Watkins, and I am still quite tempted to do so. obviously that Wolves home game is better than Arsenal at home for City on paper. But looking at all of the expected data, looking at the projected like goal odds, things like that, Haaland is still coming out really, really strongly as a potential to score this week. I think my gut instinct says that Ollie Watkins does well this week as well, but Erling Haaland would just be a booked-in transfer for next week. And because I've also got Connor Bradley as maybe a 1 or a 2 week punt until Trent comes back, I don't want to book in too many transfers between now and game week 34. So basically, it was either between having Bradley or Van Heck now, or having Haaland or Watkins. I've chosen to go with Haaland and Bradley rather than Watkins and Van Heck, because either way I'll be booking in one transfer but not the other one. I think Bradley's upside is enough that I do favour him enough over the likes of Van Heck that he will make up the difference. But again, I am very worried about what Watkins could do to me in game week 30 alone. That being said though, happy to own Erling Haaland, especially after game week 30 is out of the way. After that, I would really want him in anyway. Obviously, it sets me up nicely for game week 37, and they've got great fixtures between now and then. So we don't really need to discuss him any more than that. Moving across, I am now on a 3-4-3 strategy, and it does mean that I've incorporated both Darwin and Isak into my starting 11. I posted on Twitter earlier this week as well that I was a little bit worried about Isak between now and game week 37 because he does have a really patchy injury record, and at the moment they're going to need to rely on him to start most, if not all, matches because Wilson is still out for quite a while. With that in mind, I was a little bit worried that if I have him in my side now, there's a reasonable chance that he gets injured between now and game week 37, and it's just booking in another transfer I don't want to have to make. That being said, though, the reason I've landed on a 3-4-3 with him incorporated at the moment is that I think the odds of that happening versus the potential upside of Isak in the meantime with the fixtures that Newcastle have, I think it's just enough to sway me to take a chance on him staying fit. And then if he can't stay fit, there are a couple of other strikers I would look at, like Rasmus Højlund, for example, and also João Pedro, who is very cheap. He's back in training for Brighton. And if Isak gets injured, and I don't want Højlund as soon as, then João Pedro could be a really good option to downgrade that position, and then it enables moves elsewhere. I don't have too many other moves locked in with Isak in the starting 11. So again, it means that maybe if he does get injured, it's a move that I could make without being punished too harshly. So I am taking a risk there. Isak is a player that I love the upside of. Obviously, fantastic underlying data. I think he's got 0.7 XG per 90 on penalties, passes the eye test with flying colours as well, and played 90 twice for Sweden over the international break. And he himself said he's feeling good as well. So Everton and West Ham in the next two. So West Ham first, then Everton in the next two, both at home. I back him and Newcastle to do well in that stretch. I just need to cross my fingers and hope he stays fit, because that is something I am very concerned about. And in a straight head-to-head between him and Darwin, if I was only to pick one of them, it would probably be Darwin. But because I'm going with a 3-4-3, I can include both. I can afford to take a risk on Isak. So that's why he's just about squeezed into my wildcard draft at the moment. Now, moving on to Darwin, the final piece in the puzzle, as it were. And again, exact money to get him in before any rises or anything like that happened. I think I can thank the fact that he had a yellow flag on him, meaning that any price rises are probably not going to happen. Now, again, a bit like Salah, a bit like Bradley, the short-term fixtures for Liverpool are just incredible. So Brighton, Sheffield United, Man United and Crystal Palace, that's a great stretch. And to be honest, Darwin can stay as long as I'm comfortable with him. He can go in any given week because I think I've got 2 spare transfers that aren't really allocated to a move between now and 34. Free hitting in 34, so I don't need to worry about Liverpool players that week anyway. And after the game week 34, I can sell him any week then as well and upgrade or downgrade, I guess, in terms of funds to either Højlund or Pedro. That being said, for the time being, he is such a good asset to have. He is an injury doubt at the moment, so obviously I'm only going to pick him if we get confirmation that he's fit. but he was spotted in a training picture of some sort in the midweek as well. So we think he's back at the complex. He is potentially in training, and I think it's very unlikely that he doesn't start against Brighton. Sheffield United, maybe he gets benched, maybe he gets limited minutes in that match, but even 30 minutes of Darwin that week isn't the worst thing in the world against Sheffield United. So I'm not going to hang my wildcard decision on whether or not I back him to start against Sheffield United. I think as a complex, as a 4-fixture run, I think it's enough to make me think that Darwin is going to pay off for me for the short term, and then I can move him off as soon as I want to. So there you have it, my full 15, but we've still got a captaincy choice to make. So let's take a look at my 3 favoured captaincy options right now and figure out which one I prefer. So let's take a quick look at the 3 standout captaincy options, and I think there are valid arguments to picking any one of these 3 this week. Any one of them could be the standout point scorer in Game Week 30, all with absolutely fantastic home fixtures. But I think there is 1 or 2 that do stand out above the rest. Now, let's start off with Cole Palmer. At home to Burnley, absolutely fantastic fixture. Cole Palmer himself has also done very well against some of the promoted clubs this year already. So, bit of a flat track bully perhaps as well. So, again, home fixture, Burnley play an open brand of football, and I expect Palmer and Chelsea in general to get a lot of good chances. Like with the other 2 assets, he's also on penalties and gets very, very good minutes. And again, the injury doubt from the international break has kind of subsided. We don't really need to worry about that, I don't think. So he, within his own right, is a very, very good pick for captaincy. However, I think both Salah and Son are ever so slightly standout captaincy options and maybe 1 notch higher than Palmer, in my personal opinion. You may disagree with that. That's absolutely fine. That's what the game's all about. But I think Son and Salah could be the 2 standout options that I'm personally picking from at the moment. Starting off with Salah. So Salah has the best underlying data, the most returns, and equal most points as well, and goes up against a pretty good fixture as well in Brighton. We know Brighton have struggled to keep clean sheets this season, but what is crucial here is that recently Brighton have been no mugs defensively. They've actually really tightened up at the back. They're the 4th best team in the league for underlying defensive data, I think, since Christmas. So they have actually been a lot sturdier at the back than they were earlier in the season when we last had Salah go up against them and obviously get that brace. So I think the situation has changed slightly, but for what it's worth, I still really like the matchup there. Brighton play a brand of football that has their left back, their left full back, playing quite high up the pitch. Usually it's a Stupinian, it could be someone else, but it does leave spaces down that right flank for the opposition to exploit. Salah is the absolute king at doing that. So if he can find space in behind their left back when they bomb forward on a break, he could really, really benefit from that. So I really do like that matchup, even with Brighton's defensive data. I think Salah is himself just so good. His underlying data is so good. Liverpool are so good going forwards that the data for Brighton doesn't really deter me too much. It's more about the matchup, and I really do like that matchup. But speaking of matchups, I don't think it comes much better than Son against Luton at the moment. Now, because Richarlison is an injury doubt, I think that elevates Son to my favourite captaincy option for the time being. The reason is, of course, that he's very likely to go back to centre-forward if Richarlison is out. With that in mind, his underlying data at centre-forward is much better than even this, so better than 0.6 XGI per 90. He's also on penalties. He is pretty locked in to get 80, 90 minutes as well. And Luton have been absolutely decimated by injuries. If you go on the FPL page and you have a look at all of their injuries, you're probably going to have a bit of a giggle. It is crazy how many injuries they've got, especially in their back line as well. I think Rob Edwards even made a joke earlier this week that one of the staff got injured in a training drill because they didn't have enough players to do a head-to-head. So the staff member came in, went for the training drill and also pulled up in training as well. So they are really decimated right now. And Son at centre-forward, if Richarlison is out, is just a fantastic matchup. Luton are the worst team in the league from a defensive data point of view anyway, even worse than Sheffield United now. So we know how good Spurs can be, especially at home, and Son in particular at centre-forward could be a clutch pick. Now, do keep an eye on whether Richarlison is expected to start or not. We should get more information today. But with the doubt in mind, I think right now, Son Heung-min is my bust team captain until we hear otherwise. So there we have it, my full 15 on a wild card, and it is pretty locked in at the moment as well. I have actually made those transfers because I had no wiggle room last night and I knew that Isak was going up in price. So I did actually lock those in. So I've got rid of Porro, I've got rid of Watkins, and I do have Isak in my actual team now as well. So whatever happens now, if I do want to make other moves, I've already gotten rid of the value I had tied up in the likes of Porro or Watkins. So it will be harder to get back to them. So I am pretty committed. That being said, though, I'm never locked in until I'm properly locked in at the deadline. So do watch out for my final locked in team on Twitter at around 10:30 on Saturday morning as well. Either way, thank you so much for listening to or watching this video rather. I really hope you've enjoyed it. And if you're new around here, thank you so much for joining the fun, joining the channel, and hopefully I've done enough to earn your subscription for the time being. In the meantime, though, if you're not subscribed yet, please do consider doing so. It does mean the world to me. And if you could just leave a like on the video, that would really help with reaching out to further people in the YouTube community as well. For now, though, good luck in Game Week 30. If you're also on a wildcard, a massive good luck. Hopefully you've enjoyed and gotten good value from the content this week. I've certainly enjoyed putting it together for you. But in the meantime, I'll see you on the other side of Game Week 30 as we start preparing for Game Week 31.